Welcome to another episode of American Drug Talk, sponsored by Accredited Drug Testing, the nation's leading provider of drug, alcohol, and DNA testing. Now here's your host, the president of Accredited Drug Testing, Jim Greer.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of American Drug Talk. I'm your host, Jim Greer. Today we're coming to you from the beautiful Shingle Creek Resort located in Orlando, Florida, where the National Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association is having their annual conference. And we're also honored today to have one of the nation's leading experts in the drug and alcohol testing industry, Mr. Joe Reilly. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Joe, you are the president of Joe Reilly Associates, is that correct?
That is, yes.
And Joe Reilly Associates is well known as one of the nation's leading experts services for the drug and alcohol testing industry. You're also the former chairman of the National Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry, and you're currently on the board of directors of DAISHA, is that correct?
Yes, it is. And I'm excited to be here and excited to be a member of the board of directors of the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association. And I've been in this business since 1993.
1993, that's a long time. Now, the drug and alcohol testing industry that's meeting here in Orlando, how many people are here?
There's about 700 people here from all over the United States, people that are in all aspects of the drug and alcohol testing industry.
Laboratories?
Laboratories, medical review officers, collectors, TPAs, consultants, attorneys, even employers are here also.
And are there training sessions? Are people here to learn too?
Absolutely. There's a variety of training sessions both before and after the conference. And during the conference, there's jam-packed full of workshops from regulatory officials and from experts in the industry to share their knowledge and success with the members of the association.
Well, it sounds like an exciting time, and I know that I'm looking forward to participating in the conference. Now, Joe Reilly and Associates, you travel the country and provide consultation to employers and attorneys and various people that have some connection with the drug and alcohol testing industry. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
Yes, absolutely, Jim. So after many years of operating as a drug testing provider and many years of coming to conferences like this, people started calling me an expert. And I study this industry a lot. It is a passion of mine. And I get called on by employers, by laboratories, by other drug testing providers to provide different types of training and different types of consulting for them. And even attorneys call on me to provide expert witness testimony in cases where there may be a drug test that's gone bad or an employee's been fired over a drug test or something of that nature.
And they would hire you to come and provide either an expert witness service or a consultation to them?
Yes, it usually starts out with a consultation. We look at the facts of the case and we look to see if I believe that something went wrong and that I can help the attorney with his case or her case. If I can, I'm willing to help them. If I don't see anything there, I have to pass on it.
I see. Now, you mentioned that you used to have, or you were actually in the collection business. I think you still have a drug testing company, is that correct?
Yes, I'm also an owner of National Drug Screening, which is a nationwide provider of drug and alcohol testing services, particularly focused on the medical review officer component and a comprehensive software solution that we offer to other drug testing providers to do things like electronic ordering of drug testing and automated result delivery of drug test results.
So you don't necessarily need that piece of paper anymore when you're a person going in to get a drug test?
Absolutely, and we call it ECCF, or Electronic Custody and Control, and the goal is to get away from the paper altogether.
I see, because that paper can be very cumbersome, and a lot of people don't have it with them when they need to go get a drug test.
Well, absolutely, and people, they need to go get a drug test. They don't have that 5-part carbonless form, which has been used traditionally, and it's very cumbersome, and the electronic way is going to be really good to get out of the paper mode.
When did that form come into existence? It seems to have been around a long time.
That custody and control form has been in existence since the late 1980s, and it's almost the same form, a couple of tweaks on it over the years, but now, almost 30 years later, we're finally moving to electronic and getting rid of the 5-part carbonless form.
It took a while, didn't it?
It took an awfully long time, absolutely.
Now, has the government, the Department of Transportation, do they allow the use of that electronic chain of custody form too?
Yeah, so the electronic chain of custody form got started about 7 or 8 years ago in what we call non-regulated testing, just your average employer out there. But many employers are regulated by the United States Department of Transportation, or DOT. And until very recently, it's only been in the last year that DOT has approved the use of the electronic custody and control form, or what we call ECCF.
I see. So now everyone can have a electronic chain of custody form.
Absolutely available for those that want to participate in it, but there's still many people out there that are still using paper.
And how would, if you were a drug testing company and you wanted to operate with that electronic chain of custody form, how would you go about doing that? What is a service out there?
Yeah, so the first step would be, having laboratory accounts with laboratories that have been approved by DOT for the electronic chain of custody. Those accounts can be direct with the laboratory or other third-party service providers that bundle services such as lab, MRO, and software. So once you have those accounts set up, it's pretty seamless to order a test electronically, send what's called a donor pass to the individual. They walk in with that pass to a collection facility, they get their drug test done, and the results will come back through a software system back to the employer.
I see. Well, sounds like it's a streamlined process that eliminates all that paperwork that we've had to use for years.
Very efficient, Jim, very streamlined, and it's going to reduce a lot of errors that have occurred with paper, people writing illegibly, and it just increases the efficiency and the turnaround time, which employers are always looking for better turnaround time on drug tests.
Saves them time and money.
Time and money.
All right, let me ask you, Joe, you mentioned that part of what you do is you travel the country and you not only provide consultation, but you also can be an expert witness when litigation arises regarding a drug test. Walk me through, and our audience through, how if a person believes that he has a positive test result, has come back, but he adamantly says, I am not positive, I have not used drugs. Is there a process for, I think you called it a donor, is there a process for a donor to challenge the results of a drug test?
Yes, Jim, absolutely. So the donor is typically an applicant for a job or an existing employee that works for the employer. So they go for their drug test, they provide a urine specimen, that goes out to the lab, they do what's called an initial screening. If the initial screening is negative, it gets reported back, it's negative, they get the job or they keep their job and they're good to go.
Right.
But if that initial screening is not negative, it goes through a second confirmation test process at the laboratory known as gas chromatography mass spectrometry, or GCMS, and that pinpoints the exact metabolite of the exact drug that's in the urine system. So now it gets reported as a positive. So there's a medical review officer involved that gets those results from the laboratory. And the medical review officer will call that donor and tell them they have a positive result. And they're looking to find out if there's a medical explanation. Maybe the individual is on a prescribed drug that caused the positive. So the function of the MRO, or the medical review officer, is to rule out that legitimate medical explanation. So sometimes right then and there, it reverses to negative. But not very often, an employee or an applicant is told you tested positive by their employer. Well, when they talk to the MRO just previously, and again when they talk to the employer, they have an opportunity to have a portion of their original specimen retested at another laboratory.
If they believe the test is flawed, the result is flawed.
That's correct. They believe that, they say they've never used drugs, and now somebody's saying they're positive, let's say, for example, for marijuana or for cocaine. So really the only option is that the original specimen, which a portion of it is retained by the laboratory that did the testing, and the individual can request a retest at another laboratory.
Not the same lab that
Not
originally
the same
tested
lab,
it.
another laboratory. And there is a cost involved, and many times the employer policy says that the employee or the applicant must pay that cost of that retest. So the other laboratory does the testing, and 99.9% of the time, it comes back the same result. It's still positive. Now, a lot of times, Jim, when we tell the individual, well, you're going to have to send that original specimen to another lab, we're going to have that sent to another lab for retesting, and that's an expensive process, about $200. A lot of times the individuals say, never mind.
Oh, I see. Because they probably know that they were positive in a lot of cases.
That's correct. I mean, if they say never mind, it's fairly obvious that they were positive and they were just trying to do anything and everything they could do, which they always do anyway. They always go back to their boss and they say, boss, you know me, I've never used drugs.
Right.
Let me go back tomorrow and pee in the cup again.
I see.
And that just doesn't work, because what was in their system last week is not necessarily in their system today.
Oh, I see. So that's why they want to delay it to go back tomorrow, because they might be negative then.
Absolutely correct, Jim.
Well, now let me ask you, when you have a specimen, a urine specimen, I would say, and urine is the most common drug test, is that right?
Yeah, well, we do testing for urine, hair, oral fluid, but urine is overwhelmingly the most commonly specimen tested for.
Oh, I see. When a urine specimen goes to a laboratory and the laboratory analyzes it, and they report out the result to the MRO and then to the employer, is the specimen, the urine sample, kept, or do they discard it immediately after they analyze it?
Yeah, so what happens at the laboratory, if the result is negative, they keep it for about 5 days. There's no real reason to keep it any longer.
Because it was negative.
It's negative. The person got the job or they kept their job and everything's fine. But if it's positive, the laboratory keeps it for 1 year. They put it in a freezer for 1 year. And if they're notified of any legal challenge or any problems, they keep it longer than 1 year.
Wow. So these laboratories have a holding place for all of these samples that they get, and if it was positive, they'll keep it for 1 year.
They'll keep that for 1 year. They have huge freezers. When we go on a lab tour, we see the back of the lab, they have another building that's a freezer.
Wow.
And it typically could be 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. And it has all the frozen specimens that are kept for a year.
My goodness. Well, now, as you travel the country, let's turn to the overall drug and alcohol testing industry right now, where we are today in 2017. Do you see employers doing more drug testing?
Yeah, we've seen a significant uptick in the number of drug tests that are processed through the major laboratories, and more employers are starting the drug test today that have never drug tested in the past.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think a couple of good reasons. One is that the latest statistics from the federal government show that more people are using drugs.
Oh, I see.
About 28 million people are currently using illicit drugs.
A lot of them using them on the job?
Yes, about 70% of those people that are using illicit drugs are using them on the job.
Oh my goodness. So that's one of the reasons why you see employers. Now, is that normally large employers, or is it employers of all size?
Yeah, well, you know, drug testing kind of got started back in the very late 80s, and it was the large employers back then that was doing drug testing. Today, most large employers are still doing drug testing. DOT regulated companies are doing drug testing, but more and more small and medium-sized businesses that never did drug testing before are reading the newspaper. They're seeing that drug use is up. They're reading the newspaper, watching TV. They see celebrities and sports figures that are overdosing on drugs. They see it happening. They read the local newspaper in their own community and they see there's a heroin problem or a methamphetamine problem. Or they live in a state like Colorado or California and there's recreational marijuana that's legal. And they don't want those people that are smoking marijuana working for them because it's a safety issue.
Oh, I see. So all those factors that you just brought up are contributing to more and more employers every day doing drug testing.
Yeah, I believe so, because we do see a significant increase, and there's actually a lot of new people coming into the drug testing industry as new vendors providing services in local communities to those small and medium-sized businesses.
And they wouldn't be coming into existence if there wasn't a need for it.
If there's not a market, there's not going to be new businesses popping up.
Well, Joe, let me ask you one more question. As you travel the country, and certainly you know this industry inside and out, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the nation's drug and alcohol testing industry, or employers as a whole as it relates to drug testing? What's the biggest challenge?
Well, Jim, there's actually a couple of challenges. So for employers, the challenge is more and more states are adopting medical marijuana laws, recreational marijuana laws, and employers really just don't know what to do. They need guidance from a professional drug testing company. They need comprehensive drug and alcohol testing policies and programs. And so the challenge a lot of times is employers, they don't have policies. And sometimes even when they have them, they don't follow their own policies. So I see that as a big challenge. I mean, other challenges that we have, obviously we have a huge heroin epidemic. So we have, a lot of people out there that are using heroin and using fentanyl and, continuing to use pain medication drugs. And it's a serious problem out there.
So those are the two biggest challenges you see
yes,
facing.
Jim, absolutely.
Well, Joe, I'm glad you had the opportunity to come by and spend some time with us today and talk about your expertise in the drug and alcohol testing industry. And you certainly provided a great deal of insight to me, and I'm sure to our audience out there, about those challenges facing the industry and employers nationwide. So I want to thank you for coming in today. We enjoyed it very much. And I know you're going to be very active at the conference. I think you're actually speaking at the conference, aren't you?
I am speaking tomorrow. Going to be doing a presentation on mock audits.
Mock audits.
Where
that sounds exciting.
DOT regulatory officials come into an employer and they audit their drug testing program. But Jim, it's really been a pleasure to be here, and I enjoyed sharing the information with you.
Well, thank you, Joe. And thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of American Drug Talk from the beautiful Shingle Creek Resort here in Orlando, Florida. And I look forward to seeing each of you next week when our guest will be Joe McGuire. Joe is the incoming chairman of the National Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at another episode of American Drug Talk.